want to put words in your mouth. It seems like you're suggesting that the reason that either the federal government or some outside entity doesn't invade us is because they know that half of us have a gun.
I think all of those groups that you've talked about, most all of them wear uniforms, and they do take orders from somebody. So that's a different concept than it is to have just a populace that has the capability of self-defense. That's what our founding fathers wanted. I mean, they had been invaded by the British, and they knew that they could pick up their muskets and go defend themselves, and they did. And we wouldn't have a country if they didn't have their weapons. That's enshrined in our Constitution, and if you look at across the world, you can make the case up and down, but there have, there's some of the countries where a lot of people have a weapon and they shoot each other a lot, and others where not so much. But I'm going to continue to defend the Second Amendment for that reason, because philosophically, down the road, if we're wrong on that, it's too late. That's really the bottom line.
And is the armed tyrant, is that our federal government? Or
well,
no,
that's lifted out of the literature from the Revolutionary War era. And I can't give you who it was that I'm quoting, but it's an armed tyrant is part of that. I can Google that and their name will pop up. It'll likely be one of our founding fathers.
But it's somebody from the outside. It's not our own federal government that we.
I don't see it as our own federal government.
Okay.
I wouldn't rule it out sometime down the line in a generation or two. I wouldn't say that's not part of it, but I don't see it as that today, and I don't anticipate that's the case in anything that I can anticipate. So.
Okay. There's a couple things that I want to get to regarding healthcare in the United States. You were very clear about wanting to repeal the Affordable Care Act. But I'm wondering if there are provisions in that act that you support, that are popular with possibly your constituents, but popular with a lot of people. Things like requiring coverage of pre-existing conditions, or allowing young people to stay on their parents' insurance policy a little longer. Is there anything in that law, and particularly those two provisions, which are really pretty popular, that you support, that you think are good ideas?
The shortest of answers, no. But the reasons for that are that in Iowa, we have a law that up to age 25, children can stay on insurance. And the large insurance companies have decided that they're going to stick with 26. So it's completely redundant with regard to how Iowa is structured. It doesn't matter to Iowans. There's no way to see a difference. It is one and the same. On pre-existing conditions, it requires the individual mandate. If you're going to have guaranteed issue, shall issue under pre-existing conditions. So the individual mandate is something that is an intrusion into our lives. And I don't know that my opponent has spoken to the impossibility of the functionality of Obamacare if you have guaranteed issue pre-existing conditions but no individual mandate. But here's the solution that Iowa's already put in place. At least it maybe is a little bit inadequate, but is the foundation for the solution, and that's the high-risk pools. And I worked with the high-risk pools when I was in the state legislature. We use state tax dollars to buy down premiums for people that have pre-existing conditions and can't get insurance. That's a far better approach to this than having an individual mandate and putting this all through a one-size-fits-all government program. So those two are better. Iowa's already handled it. And if people want to buy insurance for their children in other states up to age 26, let their states make that decision. Or let them, let their states make that decision. And on pre-existing conditions, the high-risk pools, that the federal government needs to step in and put some incentives in place for some of the other states, or to perhaps expand the high-risk pools. That's a better solution than it is changing the entire health insurance system in America.
Well, I guess I would argue that the Affordable Care Act doesn't change the health insurance system, and actually kind of strengthens it by giving them millions of customers. But supposing then...
But since you brought that up...
See that twinkle in your eye.
I just, Oh, well, okay. Well, I'll go quickly through this piece. And the Senate put out this information, and it was the United States Senate Conference did this data. And some of our people turned it into a pie chart that I remember speaking to. 306 million Americans, and then you start, how many of them have, this is going into the debate, not today, but this is now probably 2.5 years old or maybe a little older. But when you start subtracting from those 306 million Americans, the numbers of Americans that have, let's say, Medicare, that are on Medicaid, that have employer-provided insurance, that are covered in some way in insurance that is adequate to match Obamacare now, and you get down to those Americans that do not have affordable options, then that was defined as those making $75,000 a year or less. That number became 12.1 million out of 306 million people, 4% of our national population. And even under the Affordable Care Act, are still going to be at least half of that 4% left over. So all of this to get at 2% of our population, and I think that it's way too high price to pay for what it does, but that's my answer to that.
There's one other Iowa State related thing I wanted to ask you
go ahead.
something about. There was and I know you always dislike this when people go to the town halls and the videotapes and everything, but I believe you were in Lamar's might have been in May, and somebody asked you about Iowa State University, and you made a comment about going down when you came for a debate a couple of years ago, and you researched the number of multicultural organizations, and you said you called them victims organizations. Victimology was the term that you used. And you said, imagine being a freshman and walking across the quad and seeing all these card tables lined up trying to recruit people into a culture of victimology. Iowa State was obviously taken aback by that when I talked to them. And they noted, there's over 800 student organizations here, many of which some of them are Christian, a lot of them are military organizations, a lot of them are ag, it's a huge ag school. Do you stand by those comments that there are student organizations that are recruiting people to be victims?
I would like to have that conversation with some of the people at Iowa State, because I don't think that they have had the benefit of having heard the full insight of what my comments were that day, or at least what I meant by them.
Okay.
And this was more than a couple years ago. Now I don't know what you'd get if you typed in multiculturalism on their website. I've done it only twice, and once it came up 59, and then a few years later I tried it and it was 55. But it actually did start with A and ended with Z, and I said Asians to Zeitgeist, which seemed ironic to me that it covered the full alphabet. Right. And I am one who has done some reading back into some of the origins of this, and I will tell you that when I arrived in the Iowa Senate, elected in '96, sworn in January '97, my attitude towards multiculturalism then was, this is a very good thing. It's an opportunity for us to be able to recognize and respect people from all walks of life, from all areas on the planet, all as really one people on this planet. The more I was engaged in the political arena, the more I saw that victimology was being used as a tool within multiculturalism. And I said that day, it's not multiculturalism that's the problem, it's the victimology within it. When you seek to convince people that they are victims, then they start casting, then they don't take their responsibility for their own destiny the way they would if they understand that instead there are people that are greatly blessed in this country. And most of us are, and most of us have opportunities, and when they're diminished by lower aspirations, then it diminishes us all in a way or another. I have on my staff is a young lady, and whose father was a boat person escapee out of the killing fields, and the scars to prove it, and her mother was raised on the reservation, and she didn't have the kind of start in life where you would say, this young lady has got a path to success. Few good things happened. Good thing happened with her faith. Good thing happened with a mentor in college at Morningside. And she was then advanced as an intern in Washington for another member of Congress. We identified her because she was from my district. And I hired her and put her into the office, and she went up through the ranks in our office to second in command as legislative director. Now she's back in the district still working for me. And I said to her one day going down the road, I said, how do you view this? With all the barriers that have been in your way, how do you view the way the world has been and how the challenges you've had in front of you? And her answer was this, Congressman, I see it as an opportunity to triumph. Now, that's the best answer I've ever heard. And I want people to understand that however difficult it might be, we all have opportunities to triumph. And I don't want them to be discouraged by the idea that they're a victim of somebody else when you're living in a country that has all of this God-given liberty like no other country in the world.
That's a great story, and it's one that I like, but I'm going back to the original thing about so do you believe, though, that Iowa State student organizations are actively recruiting and encouraging people to be victims?
I believe that some of them are advancing the idea of victimology under the rubric of multiculturalism. And I actually don't think that's debatable.
On what do you base that belief? What evidence do you have that that is true?
I'm an adult human being with a lot of life experience. And, I guess what this conversation is moving towards, which is name one, name some, and then they will get indignant, they'll be the victim of this conversation, and it'll start all over again, so I don't want to go there.
And I know we're out of time, but I want to see if we can bring this all together, because you've talked about foreign policy and the economy and many, many things. But you are elected by the people of the 4th District of Iowa. And how do you see yourself serving those people?
Well, if you look at my history, and here are some things to think about. That as a potential nominee for the existing 5th, the western third of the state, 32 counties, I took the pledge that I would go to all 286 towns, and I did. And my first district director and his outreach was also to all 286 towns. He retired. My next district director had already been to all 286 towns as our ag outreach representative. And I didn't make the promise to the public, I just made it to myself, that I would go to all 382 towns in this congressional district, and I have. It's part of the outreach. I don't think it's effective to open up an office and wait for people to show up. I think we have to do the outreach and build the network and the relationships so that when problems arise, we're sitting there with the confidence and the motive and the character and the operations of the people that we're dealing with. Then we can move without hesitation, and that's the thing that does the most good. So I set up also 2 infrastructure priorities. I said then, and one of them was to dredge Storm Lake, and that's something that I wrote. I started on that maybe in the earlier mid-90s somewhere. We're going to get that done. I was there to scoop some of the last bit of concrete into what I call the golden rebar connection of 4-lane Highway 20 west of Rockwell City last week. And that was my other infrastructure priority. We built transportation systems, and I'm not here taking credit for all of that, but I've weighed in and done my part and created opportunities to do that. And that's the kind of transportation has been an essential component of economic development. The first and most important is a component of economic development. Education is another one. And yes, we're working with Iowa State. And before the Farm Bill came out before the committee, they will recognize language within it. And if they want to point to any of that, that's fine. I don't want to go into the details of that either. But we work with everybody. We want this to grow. And this economy that we have in the 5th District today, I mean, look at Iowa. We're the 2nd highest individual income increase of the states, 2nd to North Dakota, and we didn't strike oil. We've done pretty well here. And it's not because I as an individual have gone out and made this happen, but we have worked with a lot of individuals and helped lay down the foundation. The first piece of legislation I introduced as a member of Congress helped lay the foundation for renewable energy. And today, the district I represent is the #1 renewable energy producing congressional district in all of America. That didn't happen by accident, but the people that put the capital down and took the risk and had the vision, I was able to help them by putting some foundational language in that's been, and we have also put people at the table with each other that ended up becoming the board of directors on different operations around the state that are part of the success that we have. So when I drive around this countryside and visit all 382 towns, I see ethanol plants, biodiesel plants, wind turbines up, and I know I've had a part in that. And no one deserves individual credit for any of that. And I'm driving on a new 4-lane Highway 20, and we're going to cut the ribbon on 26.2 miles of that sometime probably after the election and before Thanksgiving. And that's going to help make it easier to serve this district getting across on that 4-lane highway. That's the economic development piece of this. But it also takes a measure of experience, legislative experience for one. When you walk in there out of the business world, and I'm at payroll for over 28 years, 1,440 consecutive weeks, I believe it is. I'm at that payroll, and sometimes I had to wonder if I was going to be able to feed our kids and pay our employees. We always paid the help first. We always found a way to get it all done. But starting a business from scratch, building that business out, you learn the banking, you learn the insurance business, you learn sometimes you have to be your own lawyer, sometimes you're your own doctor. Pat yourself up because you can't afford to go to the doctor. Little cuts, not big ones. And but your own HR person, my own mechanic, my own truck driver, my own marketing person, I've done all of that in the aspects of a small business that's now in the second generation of our family. And I sold it to my oldest son, and he earned it. And now they've taken it to another level, and they're operating in North Dakota in the oil fields and here in Iowa. And this family that we have that is rooted where you've got to drive 5 miles to get to the city limits of any incorporated town. Our roots go down, they go deep there. I just was driving on the way here thinking about this, and that not only are Marilyn's great-grandparents buried within 6 miles of our house, but there are 6 generations on both sides of the family that either live here or are buried here. And our sons, who we raised to build your future here, have built their future within 10 miles of our house. And we can still go to church together on Sunday, and everybody can still come back to our place, and Marilyn cooks a big brunch, and yes, I cook it too, and the kids spill it on the deck, and it's wonderful. So my roots are here. And I see the future that, I see what we've done in the past. I've been engaged in it. Going back, I worked on 4-lane Highway 20 for 20 years. And it might be another 10 before we get it all done. But I've had the continuity of hands-on doing, creating jobs, raising a family, being blessed with grandchildren, and looking downstream to long-term goals and work within those goals as well. So I don't think anybody has to wonder about my dedication or my vision on where we've gone. We might disagree on social issues. The economic side of this, I don't think you'd want to turn that over to somebody else that doesn't have experience. And the constitutional component of this, if we don't like what the Constitution says, step forward and try to amend it. It's a deep conviction on my part, and I think you know that. And we've had a lot of success throughout these years in the past. The capital that's been created just in farmland alone, $140 billion more value in ag land in Iowa in the last 9 years, not 10. And the value of our crops and livestock has more than doubled during that period of time. When I lived through the farm crisis years, when my bank was closed Friday afternoon, April 26, 1985 at 3 o'clock, and they put a red sticker on the door, and there was a highway patrolman standing there guarding the door. I had 2 pennies in my pocket and a payroll to meet, and my customers' accounts were frozen too. I've gone through the hard times, and I've been flooded out. And I've gone to help people in floods. I've been 4 times down to Katrina. I've been over to the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City floods multiple times as well. We've had our own disaster here on the Missouri River. I put a solution in place for that. So piece after piece of this, I don't want anybody to think that I've only got one plate spinning here on the end of this cue stick. I've got all kinds of cue sticks out here, and I try to keep all the plates spinning. And I think we do a pretty good job of keeping them at maximum RPMs. But as soon as I get them all going at maximum RPMs, then I want to find another one, put another plate on it, run another agenda. So we can do a lot. We've done a lot, and a lot of it doesn't get into the press either. And that's okay. I'm not doing this for that. But I just, I have a long record, and I have, I think, a successful history. And I don't think anybody can look at that, and they might disagree philosophically, but they're not going to disagree on the effectiveness if they look at it.
Thank you.
Did you ask for that monologue at the end?
You're running for something. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
Alexander.
appreciate the time. You do. And your candor.
You're always going to get that. Because,
Tom.
you know, and Burl, I was waiting for you to weigh in there.
We don't let him get
I got off the big hook somehow. How'd that happen?
I was outnumbered.
Yeah, you
Liz? Nice to meet you.